America doesn't have stair steps going up it. It doesn't have temples on top of its summits. They could not go and break through the boat on the temples atop those great pyramids. There are none there. And that was the clue that Egypt was writing about the Americas. And the deeper I got into the records, the clearer it got. They started actually saying, and because Amun loved that land so much, he said it's his beloved land, and that word was Mary, the beloved. Mary, M-E-R-I, Mary. And the land, of course, as before, is Ta. So you have the land, the beloved land, Ta Mary. And they kept that name and just put the Ta on the end of it. So Ta Mary became a Mary Ta. We simply say America. We kept the name that Egypt gave to the Americas. So that was the big mystery behind that $10 million map that Martin Waldseemüller made and then put the name America on it in 1507. And then those who knew and those who were trying to hide things said, wait a minute, you can't put that name on here. And the next time he reprinted that map, it was off. It was gone. Because that's the name that Egypt had given the land, Tamari. That's where America came from. So now I have Egypt writing about the Americas, but they go further. They don't just talk about we named the Americas. They said where it was. They said our founders, Amun, Osiris, Isis, all of these. Of course, they use those other names, you know, the Asa and the Aset. And so they said they are in the West. And all over the monuments, they talked about Osiris and said he is foremost of the Westerners, which means not in the front of. He was the most worshipped throughout in the West. And not just his dead spirit, they were talking about the man himself being in the West. So now I have those records. And the deeper I got, the clearer it became, and then I started locating the cities all through the Americas, and not North America. Egypt says, man, they didn't call them Indians, but they said their cavalry is just so strong. They have bow and arrow cavalry. They are on horseback, and they are so strong, it's just devastating to us to try to take that land. So I tell you what, we're going to cut it right off at that river, and that's why all these pyramids are showing up from Mexico going down south, because those Apaches and Comanches and whatever other tribes were there, black tribes and others, were whooping Egypt something fierce. They did leave the record, though, that Osiris got as far as Washington, D.C. He said, I got to this land, and in this land in the north, I got to the place of the river with the largest, widest mouth. And I immediately ran to the Mississippi. I started looking around trying to see, well, where is he? I'm trying to see where Osiris is. I see that city called Baton Rouge. I know that's talking about, it's got Aton's name in it, A-T-O-N, Baton Rouge. I know that's red. And I'm looking at it. It kind of sounds like it might be an Egypt connection. I'm looking for it, but that was wrong. They said, no, when you get to that place, that's Pataline. That's an island. That's a large island. Man, ain't no island here called no Pataline. And then understanding comes in and says, wait a minute, look at the map again. See where the Mississippi River splits, and one goes over toward New Orleans and the other one goes down toward Alexandria. I said, well, yeah. I said, well, you know, when you have a Mississippi River that splits in two, then the land between those two rivers is an island, because on the south side of it is the Gulf of Mexico. All that land is an island. I was like, oh, man, here's Pataline. But he says, but that's not where I went to. He said, that's not the river I'm talking about. He said, this one has a huge mouth. And then I looked further up, and there it was. There's the Potomac and all of those waterways coming together, the Chesapeake, and making this huge mouth to this river before it empties into the Atlantic. And they say, when you get to that place, there's going to be a city designed, laid out in the shape of a parallelogram, which is like a rectangle, square. And dadgummit, if they didn't lay out Washington, D.C. in the exact same configuration that ancient Egypt said that city would be in. and then they stuck an obelisk there. Egypt wrote about that. They just said it was too hard to keep control of that land with that very strong horseback army of bow and arrow shooting warriors. So then we go down toward the south. It's okay, we have the northern extent, let's go south. And we went through Central America, and I saw the cities there. And it will surprise you to know that Egypt actually built this city that we call Troy. Troy is in Central America. If you don't know the history of it before they start calling it Troy, you will never find it probably. But when Egypt wrote about it, they actually called it with those same letters. One word was T-R-W, Troy. But they said, well, we have another name for that city. We call it Kuban, K-U-B-B-A-N. It means the hidden city because Troy is way up from the water at a time where cities, major cities, were being placed on the waterway because that's how commerce was being conducted by ship. Troy was not. Troy was up in the rainforest, way up in the mountains, hidden. And so Egypt called it Kuban, the hidden city. And I'm going to give you something I've never told anybody other than close associates. You want to find Troy? You go find the city that Egypt says its name is Kuban. And you'll find this Maya city called C-O-P-A-N, Copan. And there you will have ancient Troy. That's the African city, Troy. So you go further south. You go through Central America. Then you go into South America. I'm looking for Thebes now. I've got Memphis, but they said Thebes is Thebes of the West. That's how they wrote it. Thebes of the West. I want to know where it is. And I found it. And the great thing about it is Thebes of the West is the city that David took. That's Jerusalem. It was built to honor the ancient Egyptian ruler, co-founder, the one that most of your listeners will probably recognize as Heru, that others call Horus. The city was built to honor him, and it was laid out in the shape of the hieroglyphic symbol that is his name. When you look in the ancient hieroglyphs that these Africans that we now call Egyptians left, when they wrote the word, the name Heru, it's the hawk in profile, the entire body with the wings on the side. That gives you the word H-E-R-U, or Heru. And they laid out the city in that design. It's still there right now today. When you fly above and look down, there is that hawk laid out on the ground, the walls, the streets, the temples, everything that they had laid that they have knocked down, but the foundations are still there. It shows you the outline of the name of the city. It was ancient Egypt's or ancient Africa's Heru. Now, they built a temple there to honor Heru. And some of the listeners and readers will know that one of the words that ancient Egypt used for a temple was per, like a rectangle with an opening in it, almost like a house or a temple. And it was per, P-R, or P-E-R. And so when they have that temple there and they're talking about that place where this famous temple of Heru's is, they would say the temple of Heru or Peheru. And so now we don't say Peheru, we simply say Peru. It's that simple. It's that clear. It's been standing in front of our eyes this entire time. But as long as you let others educate you and tell you what a thing means and you don't test it, you keep teaching the same errors. And that's what was going on. They were getting some knowledge, but they were teaching the errors with the knowledge that they were getting. The Egyptologists knew, but they knew that they were going to hide those Africans. They were going to hide that this was an African civilization because they were trying to justify blacks as being inhuman so that they could make wealth off of them as slaves. And you couldn't say that they were inhuman and uncultivated if you show them with these civilizations. So they distanced them. They divorced the African from the Egyptian histories, or they attempted to. When they came into the Americas in the 1500s, supposedly stumbling upon it with Columbus, you have to understand Columbus had just returned from West Africa. He had the maps. The same ones that had come over and became what we now call Aztecs, and they hated that. That was a derogatory term. It meant that they worshiped the pagan deity Sutek that ancient Egypt writes about. So if you're of something, you are a something. You are of it. So they were Sutecs or Aztecs. They said, no, we're Christians, we're Muslims, and there are others among us who do worship these traditional beliefs. But they were in a mode of trying to show them as being uncultured and uncivilized. So they knew, when they came in the 1500s, they knew where they were. They knew this was Egypt. You find this strange letter in Spain where they're having the wars against the blacks who are now running Spain wars, and they didn't lose that until 1492. And when they defeated those Moors, then they said, now we can go and fight the war against the blacks over in the Americas, but not until we whoop the ones that's on our doorstep or we're on their doorstep. So that's the history that's unfolding. They knew that the Holy Lands were over here. The Vatican knew. And they sent it over to destroy these churches and these people so that the Vatican could be the head of the churches by destroying the other 11 that was in the Americas. And Spain had the right to come in and start trying to get the commerce to become rich off of the gold and the other things in the African cities and with the slavery.